Greetings, science people. It's me, Mr. Miller, again. This time we're talking about mitosis and the cell cycle. Now, we've talked a little bit about mitosis already, but what is mitosis? Well, it's simply a process in which the nucleus divides to form two new nuclei and two cells with identical DNA. What have we learned? Cells come from cells, and that's exactly where they come from, is from mitosis. Now here's a quick fun clip from the Big Bang Theory and Sheldon as he proves to us cells come from cells. Let's take a look.
More pad thai, please.
Sheldon, you've already had 4 servings.
You might want to slow down a bit, buddy. Just one more bite. Sheldon? Sheldon, are you okay? I'm just so full. That's it. No more Thai food.
Okay, so there's Sheldon demonstrating mitosis, how cells come from cells. We got another Sheldon from Sheldon. All right, let's move on. So why do cells make more cells? What's the whole point? 3 main reasons. Number 1, growth. Number 2, repair cells. And number 3, replacing cells after they've died. All right, so here's the mitosis cycle. Interphase, prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase with cytokinesis at the end. And here's the phase. We can take a quick look here at our animated screen of mitosis, and we can see here's interphase, and we'll go through this quickly. Prophase, things are separating apart now. We see metaphase, we've lined up in the middle. Anaphase, things are separating, and then finally telophase, we're now getting our 2 new cells, and finally cytokinesis shows the 2 brand new cells completely divided. And the whole process starts over again. Okay, so how do we remember this? Here's a little phrase to help you. I prefer meatloaf at tennis camp. That's a way to remember everything in order. IPMATC. Interphase, prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase, cytokinesis. Now remember, the interphase, I stands for I rest. It's the I rest stage. P for prophase stands for the produce. This is where we're actually producing, we begin to produce the new cells. Metaphase is the middle part. That's where we see everything lined up right down the middle of the cells. Anaphase, A stands for apart. We start to see everything pull apart. Telophase is where we start to actually see the 2 new cells form. Cytokinesis is we're apart. Brand new, 2 new cells that are identical. So IPMATC, I prefer meatloaf at tennis camp. Let's start with interphase, the I rest phase. It occurs before mitosis actually begins. So it's right in the very beginning before it's even mitosis. Here the chromosomes are being copied, and the chromosomes appear as thread-like coils. These little things right down here, you'll start to see that. That's chromatin. All right, that's what's happening here in the interphase. And here's a good example. You can kind of see that chromatin right in there starting to form in a plant cell, and even right there in the animal cell as well. So that's a good example of both. Next we go to the prophase. All right, this is the actual first step in mitosis. This is where we start to produce the new cells. We see things starting to form. Mitosis begins, which means the cell is beginning to divide. Now we see centrioles form. Another name for centrioles are the poles, which are these little things right here. They look like little poles, little rods. They appear and begin to move to the opposite ends of the cell. Then we also see spindle fibers form. Here are the little spindle fibers. They look like little pieces of thread, little fibers. They also are starting to form in between these little poles or rods. That's prophase. Let's take a look at 2 actual cells. Here's the animal cells. There's the spindle fibers right there forming, and there's the little poles that you can see starting to form as well, the centrioles that we call them. So this is prophase. Next, metaphase. This is the middle phase, or the second step in mitosis. So metaphase, the middle or second step in mitosis. We see the chromatids, or the pairs of chromosomes, attached to our spindle fibers now. So there's our spindle fibers, and we see the chromatids, which are these pairs of chromatins, or chromosomes, actually pairing up here in the center, in the middle. And we said metaphase, middle, everything's kind of pairing up right there. We see our centrioles, which are our little rods or poles there, and there's those spindle fibers. And here's a great example of metaphase in both animal and plant cells. Here they've lined up right in the center. You can see those little spindle fibers all right there, which is really cool. And here it is in a plant cell too. You can see them lining up there. A little harder to see the spindle fibers in this one. Now we're on to anaphase, the third step in mitosis, the actual process of mitosis. This is the apart phase. Here we see the chromatids, or those pairs of chromosomes, separate now and begin to move to the opposite ends of the cell. So now we can see that middle's gone. These guys have separated, and they're starting to pull to the opposite ends. We see our centrioles, we see our spindle fibers, and of course everything is now separating. That's our anaphase. Here's some great examples. You can clearly see that they're now pulling apart. We don't see the spindle fibers attached here. They're actually stretching apart. This is the anaphase, the apart phase. Now, telophase. Remember, this is our fourth step in mitosis. T stands for two new. We now can actually start to see the two new cells forming. So we have two new nuclei that have formed. Here's a nuclei at this end. Nuclei at this end. Our chromosomes now appear as chromatin, which is threads rather than rods, and we can see those. There's your chromatin now appearing as thread instead of the rods. And mitosis has officially ended. The process of mitosis, that separation, is ending, because that leads us to our final step, which is the fifth step, called, we'll talk about telophase here first. Here you go. You can now see they've all separated. You can see the new nuclei that have formed. We've just about completed the whole process. You see the actual pulling apart. They've almost completely come apart. Now that leads us to cytokinesis, which is after mitosis. It is when the actual cell membrane moves inwards, right in here, and kind of pops off and creates two daughter cells, two new cells, each with their own nucleus, each with identical chromosomes. They are identical. This is cytokinesis, the very end when the parts are completely separated. All right, and we can see that right here. Let's make sure I didn't. Yep. So here is animal mitosis in review for interphase, prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase, and of course here is the cytokinesis as they're pulling apart. There's plant mitosis, so you can get a better idea on this one. There's the interphase, prophase, metaphase, they're lining up in the middle, anaphase, where they're pulling apart, telophase, where we almost stretched them completely out into two new cells, and then cytokinesis, when they're actually two separate cells now, both with their own nuclei. Alright, so here's the cell cycle in review. Our first phase of mitosis is interphase. We start to see the centrioles, or the poles, start to stretch to the ends. That leads us into mitosis, prophase, where we see things producing. We start to see the spindle fibers form. They start to attach. And then that leads us to metaphase, where everything lines up in the center. And then mitosis with anaphase, where we start to see everything pull apart. Spindle fibers are releasing. They're pulling towards the poles now. Telophase, we see both two new cells forming. And then finally, we end with cytokinesis, where the actual cells have pulled apart and we have identical or sister cells now. So there's the cell cycle. Last but not least, our quick review here. Interphase, the cell grows to its mature size, makes a copy of its DNA, and then prepares to divide into two cells. These two identical structures are called centrioles. They are also copied, and we see those there. The second phase here is prophase. The chromatin's in the nucleus. It condenses to form the chromosomes. And those pairs of centrioles move to the opposite ends, which we see. And we see that leads us to our metaphase, where we see chromosomes line up across the middle. That's the middle part. And then that leads us to anaphase, where we see the centromere split. Our spindle fibers are pulling apart, and they're moving to the opposite ends. Then that leads us to telophase, or telophase, where the chromosomes begin to stretch out. They lose their rod-like appearance, and we start to see the two new cells forming. And then finally, last but not least, is cytokinesis, where everything is just kind of pinched off. We've got our new cells, and each one is identical. We call those our two daughter cells now. So there is our mitosis in a nutshell, and that ends mitosis. See ya.